because there's a lot of Zelda fans out there that don't like this game, and I think stubbornly so, that don't like this game.
You know, it's interesting because I don't know very many people who put Skyward Sword as high as you or I do on our lists. It's
Yeah, there's about two other people at Zelda Dungeon that really like this game. So let's talk about motion controls first and foremost here. Let's discuss this and get it out of the way because this pertains to the actual Wii itself.
I think we
I
got
never had a
lucky.
problem with motion controls, and yeah, you might be right. We might have got lucky because some people say that they did. Um, I don't know. To me, I got like the special gold Zelda edition of the Wii Motion Plus Wii Remote or Wiimote, and it worked like a dream. Um, I thought it was really fun. Like when I look at Twilight Princess, you're wrangling your wrist like a limp fish, and that's your sword attacks. And I'm like, okay, this is neat, I guess. In Skyward Sword, you are in the action. Like you've got to slash your enemies precisely if you're gonna beat them. And to me, it felt like a lot better job of immersing the player and getting them interacting with everything that's going on. Like when I finally hit some of these sword strikes, I was just like, okay, perfect, I did that right. Like I'm awesome. Whereas the Twilight Princess, it's like whatever. I'm just wiggling my wrist, you know.
And there's
Doing a
nothing more
Skyward Strike
annoying.
and Skyward Sword was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's nothing more annoying than trying to go up against a Deku Baba and just not being able to hit that darn mouth in the right way because he keeps switching it up. Ugh. But that being
So
said,
yeah,
I mean, I didn't have
motion
any issues
controls.
either. So,
Yeah, you never had any problems either.
no, and I played on two different Wiis as well. So, you'd think that I would have a more likely chance of running into that issue since so many people seem to have had it. But I don't know whether it was because um, the people that were having the issues were just the vocal majority as opposed to the actual majority. But I don't know, man. I had
I
pretty flawless controls in terms of not
we've talked
necessarily
about this
me,
before.
but the
Yeah,
system.
we've talked about it before on this podcast. How E3 basically ruined Skyward Sword for a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I think that really really sticks with Skyward Sword. I think it just carries that stigma around of like, oh well, it didn't work at this demo, so it probably doesn't work at home. You know what I mean? So I think it really suffers from that E3. And I don't think it ever truly recovered. Skyward Sword didn't also come out at an optimal time. This game came out in November 2011, and the Wii was like the Wii was pretty much a dead fish in the water at this point. There hadn't really been any games of note to come out since like 2010. So it was a tough time for Skyward Sword. Got dealt a lot of tough cards, I think. But I like the motion controls. I think were great.
It lent itself to a new experience and being able to have a game in where you could kind of design enemies and design puzzles based off of the fact that you would be much more immersed into it. It felt good. But I also
Hmm.
understand that if it wasn't working for someone, how it would play out poorly. But because it works so great for us, I think that's part of the magic. And I mean, apart from like the solid gameplay that you and I experienced, I think the other really great part of it that can sometimes gets lost in that shuffle of oh my god, my Wiimote doesn't work or my Wii Motion Plus is not giving me the proper read inputs is the story. Because the story of
We're,
Skyward
we're gonna get we're
Sword.
gonna get there in just a sec here.
Okay.
Before we get there, sorry, I want to integrate the controls just a bit more here, because that's when you think of Skyward Sword for better or worse, that's what you think of here. Let's take a quick look at some of the items that appear in this game and that made a great use of the Wii motion controls. The first item that comes to mind for me is that little bug
The beetle?
yeah, the beetle that you can send flying. Like it, I think that Skyward Sword took a lot of really cool items that had sort of kind of been done before and really reworked them to to augment the Wii controls well, such as like, I mean, you'd had the claw shots in Twilight Princess, and those were pretty cool. But I think that it also introduced like just a lot of like little cool items like that, cool extra little puzzles like that I thought that really added to the game. And I think that like also like when I think of Skyward Sword, I think of the dungeons in that game and how fantastic they are. Some of my favorite dungeons in the series are in Skyward Sword, and bosses for that matter too. The boss of the ancient, what is it? Ancient chasm, schism, Chester, whatever that guy's called.
Galactus.
Yeah, he's awesome. That's probably one of my favorite boss battles in all of Zelda. The Buddha looking statue. Dude.
I was about to say, otherwise known as one of the best battles in all of anything, in my mind, from Nintendo.
Yeah, but I mean, you also nailed it. So let's just skip the rest of that, and we'll just dive into the story. For me, that's why Skyward Sword is number one. If it wasn't for that story, Super Mario Galaxy would probably be number one on this list.
I can agree with that. I mean, there's so much to it. I mean, for one thing, we had a story in which everybody was looking at it from the start and going, same thing that happened kind of with Breath of the Wild, where people are like, where could this fit in our own, personal idea? Because back then, we didn't have a timeline yet. And so everybody's thinking, it was like, where might we fit this in? And then you start playing through the game, and like just things are so weird. Like we got everything named after the goddesses. So we've got, Farron, Dinral? Oh no, that was the dragon. In Breath of the Wild.
That's Breath of the Wild. You've got Farron, Lanayru, and
Eldin, that's right. So you have these three lands that clearly mimic the names of the goddesses. Then you start encountering the three different dragons. You were encountering Impa again.
Also, this is clearly far and away the best version of Impa ever in the series.
Yeah.
Can we agree on that?
Yes, absolutely. Right. I think if Ocarina of Time actually showed like Impa doing half the crap that Impa does in Skyward Sword, that might be the best one, but far and away, absolutely.
I think that Impa just, like, her character design looks so cool.
And we see...
Like, if she shows up in Smash Ultimate as a clone of Sheik, she better have her Skyward Sword.
Yeah. And we see two different versions of her, too, which is incredible, kind of like seeing that evolution.
Well, which is a spoiler, but also really, really cool.
Right.
So, you know that I don't like the timeline. But I do love a good origin story, and just showing the seeds of how the Master Sword was actually formed, I thought was great. But like, the thing that I notice when I think about Skyward Sword's story is just how much more polished this seems. It just like, even from a cinematic standpoint, like the close-ups of Zelda's face when she's going to sleep and sealing herself away are heartbreaking. The fight scenes between Girahim and Impa are just like... The cinematics of it just seem to be on another level from any previous Zelda games. But yeah, it's just, I think that like that's probably the best version of Zelda that we've ever seen. Her relationship with Link in that game, I think, feels so natural, and like I'm a pretty, my heart is black, and I'm just like, I hate love stories and stuff like that in games. But like, I was rooting for Link and Zelda in this game.
I agree, because I don't really ship Link and Zelda in any form usually, but Skyward Sword it made it work, and even if you didn't ship them, like, they worked really well as best friends, and you could have it either or, even though it's heavily implied to be, a romance.
That was a romance for sure. Who's saying they're just friends in that game?
I agree, but you could say that, and it would be okay. But like,
how funny was that side quest with the item girl too? The poor item girl.
Oh my god, no.
What was her name? Like Prudus or something like that. Something awful.
It was a shame, is what it was.
No, I think that there's so many just incredible moments in this story. A lot of people really dump on Fee. I think she's great. She's one of my favorite companions, and I don't care what you say. At the very end of that game, when Fee's theme's playing, Fee's Farewell, that piano music is playing. Thank you, Master. May we meet again in another life. I don't care who you are, how cold your heart is. If you are not tearing up, you are not a Zelda fan. That is a great, great scene. And then before that, you have the scene that, as I previously mentioned, where Zelda is sealing herself away. She calls Link Sleepyhead. Oh my God, that almost has me in tears right now.
The emotion of Skyward Sword and the way that they execute it, the way that they portray every moment, from when you start as a Loftwing Knight initiate, trying to become, an official knight, and then, going through all the trials and tribulations, chasing after Zelda in the hopes that you can just save her from this mysterious, Girahim, who we don't, we find out later what he is and what he's trying to do.
And what a creep that mofo is.
He's one of my favorite characters. I mean,
well, he would be one of your favorite characters.
I cannot get over going into a Zelda game fight with him, and then him just whispering.
And he's licking your ear.
Yes, it's so good.
All right, let's quickly talk about some of the faults of this game. I think we could probably both agree that flying your Loftwing kind of sucks.
Yeah, it was very.
It's not that great. That's the one instance where like the Wiimote I think doesn't feel all that good.
Yeah, not only that, like where all the entire time you're flying your Loftwing, it's mostly empty space. It gives me very Wind Waker-y feels, and we all know how I feel about Wind Waker.
And a lot of people also dump on the imprisoned fights, which I don't think they're awful, but I also can see where people are coming from when they say that, like, okay, I've already fought this guy 3 times.
Yeah,
I get that. I think the payoff was good.
Yes.
Totally when you get Demise coming in and you find out like the origin. It's almost like the origin story of the Master Sword and of Ganondorf. And it's like the origin story of the whole series, really.
It absolutely is.
So yeah, just like, man, I know that a lot of people in the Zelda community are just like, oh, Skyward Sword sucks, but I will defend this game until the day I die. I think it's one of the greatest Zeldas ever. It's a masterpiece. It's in my top 5 favorite games of all time.